The deadline for the ANC Secretary-General Ace Magashule to step aside from his position because he faces criminal charges in the Free State is scheduled to run out this week. It comes after a week dominated by the leader of the ANC, President Cyril Ramaphosa's testimony at the Zondo Commission. The spokesperson of the African National Congress is Pule Mabe. I'm pleased to tell you he's here for you now. Pule, good afternoon to you, and thanks very much indeed for coming in.
Afternoon, Stephen, and afternoon to your viewers.
As you and I speak right now, is Ace Magashule still in his position as Secretary-General of the ANC?
Well, of course he is. You'll appreciate that the ANC as a self-respecting organization has got processes. We are convening a National Working Committee meeting of the African National Congress on Monday to receive reports. Remember, in the statement we issued at the end of the NEC that took place from the 26th to the 29th, we did indicate that the SGO will begin a process of compiling a list of all of those of our members who might be impacted by the decision to step aside. So the NWC will be getting that report, process it. The National Executive Committee will be sitting over the weekend, of course, to just really deal with issues around the implementation of its own decisions.
Okay, so he's Secretary-General now. He might not be when? Next weekend after the NEC meeting? Is that when the finality would happen?
Because we're going to the NWC, we'll be able to get all the different reports, including whatever issues that comrades would have raised. You will know that the SG on the one end had also indicated a process he wanted to undertake with what ANC elders, those that would have led the movement. And he has already met with President Zuma, has already met with Treasurer General Ramaphosa. So we'll be getting all of that report, including the work that provinces would have done. There's already been meetings that would have taken place with provincial chairpersons and provincial secretaries that the SGO would have undertaken. So the National Working Committee would have to then get reports that begins to deal with all of these things. So in terms of ANC processes, the national officials would have received and processed these reports, take them to the NWC. When we rise from the NWC, we'll have an NWC report that will then serve before the National Executive Committee.
Okay, is that report going to be made public, or are we going to have to wait for it on a WhatsApp group?
Well, we've never distributed our report on WhatsApp groups. The one that make it there might be lookalikes, but in the normal course, they are not ours. What we'll do is that when we finish the National Working Committee, if there are issues that come out of the National Working Committee requiring us to communicate out to the public, we shall do so.
Okay. Just to be clear, because there's been some debate around this, the 30-second deadline, did it pass the 30-day deadline, excuse me, did it pass yesterday? Did it pass today? Is it passing as you and I speak?
Well, the expectation was that in the 30 days from the time when we rose from the National Executive Committee, that work would have happened, compiling a list, those that might be impacted by the decision of the National Executive Committee, if there are issues of appeal that need to be raised. Remember, the guidelines themselves do provide for a number of avenues where members impacted by the decision could also be able to reflect on their own issues. We'll only know that when we get reports from provinces. As it stands, the NEC, we are now going into the National Working Committee meeting. We'll then move there to go to the National Executive Committee. When we leave there, should there be issues that require us to communicate out to the public, we shall do so.
Okay, I mean, it seems, I'm not a member of the ANC, but it seems to me fairly simple. It's a binary decision. He either steps aside or he doesn't. There's either a deadline or there wasn't. There was a deadline, we were told.
No.
It doesn't seem that he stepped aside.
I don't think that we are changing that. But remember that ANC processes issues. You know, we are an organization of process. We are going to have to take all of those reports and understand, okay, these are the members that are impacted by the decision that you shall have taken yourself in the National Executive Committee. In the normal course, this member and that member have done the following. These other members have raised these other issues. Remember, there are options. A member might want to appear before the Integrity Commission of the African National Congress, or might want to raise an appeal, if you like. Those things are all stipulated in the guidelines. So the ANC must be given the space to walk this path. You know, the ANC is loyal to its own decisions, by the way, so that we are clear on that, Stephen. The ANC is not moving away from the commitment it made when it rose from the NEC that set from the 26th to the 29th.
Okay, it just seems, you know, and I hate to harp on this point, but it just seems that what was going to be a month-long process, 30 days, is now going to get longer and longer. I mean, is there a final deadline to win this process?
Well, I don't even think we should actually look at it like that, or hope that the national spokesperson of the ANC will come on national television and pronounce on issues that are not necessarily directives of the National Executive Committee. Safe to say that the National Working Committee, this is what we said was going to happen, was that at the end of that period, the NEC will sit and the NWC will. So we're doing exactly that. Because remember, decisions of the ANC can only taken and upheld in ANC meetings and then communicated out to the public. That's what a self-respecting organization does.
Okay. There are other people who face criminal charges in the ANC who would also, as I understand it, have to step aside. Bongani Bongo is a slightly complicated argument. I'm going to put him to one side for a moment, but Sandile Gumede, I think, would be an example of someone who faces criminal charges. And as I understand, the NEC resolution and the NASREC resolution would have to step aside. There are others. Has anyone stepped aside during this period that you're aware of?
Remember, that's what we'll get from a report.
Okay, that's what I'm trying to get to, the principle of the thing, away from specifics. So no one officially you can say has stepped aside.
I wouldn't know or speak with authority, because that would only come out from reports, and reports are only filed in formal meetings of organization. Now, the first meeting of the organization ever since we came out of that NEC that ended on the 29th of March will be sitting only through the National Working Committee on Monday. And when we leave that meeting, we shall have known that these are the reports that we want the NEC to consider and process, or these are the steps that have already been taken. So I wouldn't want to hear say this has happened, this has not happened, because that will be a subject of a report that the Secretary-General's office, that includes the Secretary-General and the Deputy Secretary-General, shall have compiled and ensured that our own officials have also processed accordingly.
Okay. Now, this is it's very complicated. I mean, it's very complicated, I know, for you to speak about an organization in this position in a strange way. You know, your boss is also the Secretary-General. That's how it works. He's in charge of communication, so it's very complicated. But I do want to just, because there's going to be a lot of intense speculation about what should happen if the Secretary-General does step aside. So if he does step aside, who fulfills the function of the Secretary-General? Is it the Deputy Secretary-General?
Well, I just want to correct that. I'm a member of the National Executive Committee, elected at the NEC. I'm appointed spokesperson by the National Executive Committee. My role is regulated by something called communications protocols. The 54th National Conference of the ANC adopted or agreed or directed the NEC to adopt protocols. These protocols will then govern and guide how the ANC runs its own communications. So when we come and speak to yourselves, we do so guided by the prescripts of the National Executive Committee and representing the entirety of that collective. So I felt I must just correct the line you made.
No, sure, I get that. But I mean, communication does come under the SG's office. He's the accounting officer.
Yes, he's the accounting officer in terms of 16.6 of the ANC Constitution and communicating decisions of the National Executive Committee. But the national spokesperson is responsible to issue statements of the NEC. It's basically the first time, Stephen. It's for the first time that after NASREC, they took a decision to adopt the protocols. So why I'm clarifying this is just to make sure that yourselves in the media understand how the ANC functions. So when I come out to speak, I do so on behalf of the entirety of the National Executive Committee. Now, I don't speak on behalf of the President or on behalf of the SG, on behalf of the DSG. I speak on behalf of the rest of the National Executive Committee. So that's why I'm wary of speaking my own views. I've got to always make sure that the things that I restate are positions and decisions of the organization, not how I see things. It doesn't work like that. So we gave the SGO a responsibility to compile, working together with provinces, a list of those of our cadres that will be impacted by the decision, make sure that they are advised, so that if there are challenges, then you then kick in 25.70 of the ANC Constitution. This was clear. We communicated this quite clearly. So sometimes the message of the ANC has to overly repeat it to make sure that even yourselves in the media could actually understand what the African National Congress is doing.
I appreciate the clarity. I just want to be sure about, because there's going to be intense speculation. You can imagine the headline, Pule, that if Ace Magashule steps aside, power vacuum, who's in charge, blah, blah, blah. You know what media types like. Please let me ask the question, because I think this is important. Who is then who has the legal authority of the Secretary-General's office of the ANC if Ace Magashule does step aside? That's the question.
Well, I mean, look, the constitution of the ANC is quite clear on those. I wouldn't even want us to get into that discussion. Safe to say that the Secretary-General of the ANC, when he made a request for the 30-day, he did indicate the sort of steps that he wanted to undertake. Consultation with elders. I've said this point. He has met with President Zuma. He has met with Treasurer General Matthew Posa. He was to also meet with President Thabo Mbeki, also meet with Kgalema. So he will be saying, this is the work that, this is the kind of consultation that I've undertaken. Because appreciate this, Stephen. It's not a small decision.
Sure.
It's not a small. So what we ought to do all the time is that when you take weighty decisions in the ANC, make sure that you take everyone on board, so that whatever decision or finality you arrive at does not contribute to dividing your own organization. We need to make sure that whatever we are doing or seeking to do ultimately contribute to the unity and renewal of the ANC in a much more constructive manner. So that's why this exercise has been quite important, to make sure that there is engagement with provinces, to allow those that are affected, in this instance, our Secretary General, to do the kind of work that he said he wanted to do, because it's quite a weighty decision. And then come back and be able to then say, the ANC, having undertaken all of this, we are now implementing our decision in this manner.
So I mean, that's true. I agree with you. I think
Yes.
for purposes of internal ANC unity, I mean, there's no other way to do it. You're a democratic organization. But there are consequences for everything you do in politics. We've got local government elections in just a few months' time. The longer this goes on, the more divided the ANC may appear in the minds of many voters. Doesn't it damage the ANC and voters? Isn't that the negative consequence you may suffer from your attempt to try and foster unity in this way?
Well, of course, I mean, we have got to make those kind of assessment. We'll be getting reports from our provinces. I'm sure they too have had, I mean, it's not like the National Executive Committee is operating somewhere in the bush and our province and regions are operating somewhere in the field. No, we are operating in an open democratic space. They are alive to the issues that we are engaged on. They get to see statements of the National Executive Committee. We'll receive all of those reports from the SGO. And then having received those reports, we'll accordingly process those. And when we rise, we'll be able to communicate to the people of South Africa.
No, it's been an intensely political week, most of it revolving around the governing ANC. There's been the Zondo Commission, there's the step-aside resolution. We've already been discussing that in the last few minutes. Still with us, the National Spokesperson of the African National Congress. Pule, thanks very much indeed for staying with us this afternoon. Obviously, the President's testimony this week as the leader of the ANC. Are you pleased with what President Cyril Ramaphosa said as how he represented the ANC at the Zondo Commission?
Yes, of course. I mean, I was part of the delegation that was with the President for 2 days. There was a technical team led by Comrade Jeff, Comrade Ronald Lamola, Comrade Krish Naidu, Comrade Andres Nel. On the com side, it was myself and the head of the chairperson of the communications subcommittee, Comrade Nkenke, as well as Comrade Swongile Besani. The Deputy Secretary General was there, the Treasurer General, the National Chairperson, and
Secretary General was
and Comrade Lindiwe Sisulu.
Yeah.
Well, of course, I mean, we had, but whatever message that we carried out there on our posters, we had pictures of all our 6 national officials leading on the renewal message that we wanted to drive. And we had ensured that every time when the President was presenting, from his opening remarks to his own closing statements, you saw we're flooding Twitter, our Instagram accounts, our Facebook accounts, making sure that the ANC message is widely understood. And we must commend our structures, the manner in which they carried themselves, ensuring that there is greater understanding on the presentation of the African National Congress. So it was not just the President of the ANC presenting for himself there. It was the entirety of the ANC and the Zondo Commission clarifying on how its own internal processes work. And I mean, it was led first by the National Chairperson, who was there last week. Now it was the President who have managed, I mean, to clarify from cadre deployment. There's an article out penned by the Treasurer General, which was in the Business Day, clarifying. I mean, I know that he was on this studio this morning again, amplifying the very issues that were raised there. So there's been quite a lot of work that we have been doing. I mean, in the build-up to going to the commission, we're out in the streets led by the Deputy Secretary-General on the renaming. So what you saw, the renaming of William Nicol into Winnie Madikizela Mandela Street, all those things were part of the build-up activities even as we were going into this. But to make sure that we begin channeling the energies of our members to have these constructive and positive engagements on the developments happening in society.
Okay, I mean, the real question, I suppose, is after everything that's happened within the ANC, and we've all watched it very, very closely, it's sort of been a very transparent process in many ways, is do you believe the ANC is reforming itself? And I think that's the question that voters are looking to be answered. Is the ANC reforming itself?
Do you want to use the word reform or do you want to use the word renew? I just want to make sure that
I'm happy with the word renew.
Okay, that's fine. The ANC is renewing itself. The ANC has always said, what are those things that are happening either to individual leaders of the African National Congress or to the organization itself that are debasing us from the role of leading society? What do we need to do to make sure that how we position ourselves out in the public assist us to consolidate confidence? Because remember, the only thing that allows the ANC to facilitate the transformation of society is through its own leadership of government. And what the ANC has got to do when it leads government, it has got to make sure that it wins the confidence of the people it leads. Now, we said that in the year of Charlotte Maxeke, we are going to drive unity and renewal to be able to reconstruct society. So it means everything else that we do every month has got to be about reconstruction, has got to be about unity, has got to be about renewal. Now, what are the things that are undermining or debasing us from the renewal project? Is it about public representatives who could be doing things that are contributing towards giving the ANC a bad name? What are we doing to deal with all those misnomers? Have we ensured that we stick to principles of through the eye of the needle to make sure that those that lead the ANC are drawn from the best cadres amongst ourselves? So we ought to be seen doing all of that work. So going to the Zondo Commission, engaging in all these renewal activities. Look at what happened in April, earlier this month when we celebrated Mama Charlotte Maxeke's 150th anniversary. The ANC Women's League in their blouses, they were all over. They were all over. Out in the country, we worked with the AME Church, the Church of Mama Charlotte Maxeke, to make sure that we could also use those kind of relationships, even with these religious formations where Charlotte Maxeke belonged to drive a message that it must be the best cadres that lead the transformation agenda in society.
So that's fine, and the campaigning is important. I get that, but
but it's beyond campaigning.
Yes. But the hospital named after her had a fire, and the fire hydrants didn't work. You know, is that really proof that the best possible people who can go through the eye of the needle are being deployed? If fire hydrants don't work, it's the year of Charlotte Maxeke, sure, but the hospital named after her had fire hydrants that didn't work.
But the provincial government of Gauteng had gone out, the Premier of Gauteng, Comrade David Makhura, was out to clarify and deal with the measures that they are putting out there. There will always be challenges, but you see, the ANC must never be measured only on challenges. It must also be measured on how best it rose in dealing with those challenges that exist out in society.
I hate to have to come back to this, but I feel I must. We talk about renewal of the ANC, and I think that is, in a way, the defining question of this particular political era, the last couple of years since 2017 until now. Do you believe that voters will accept that the ANC is being renewed when someone who is facing criminal charges is still the Secretary-General? I mean, I realize in some ways it's an unfair question, but I think Ace Magashule has become the symbol of something, rightly or wrongly, fairly or unfairly, possibly unfairly. But if someone facing criminal charges doesn't step aside as the Secretary-General, what proof of renewal is there?
Well, we have already outlined a process. We've already outlined a process. I think that the ANC must be trusted with being loyal to its own processes. We will have our own meetings of organization, and we will rise there and communicate out to the public. The Secretary-General of the ANC has dedicated his entire life to the African National Congress. He has spent his youth and adult life in the ANC. That is one point that we must also respect. We see him as well as a freedom fighter. There could be challenges that he's having to deal with, But that does not remove the contribution he has made in driving and sustaining the national democratic revolution.
Okay. Pule, I'm afraid I must ask you a situation about yourself as Pule Mabe rather than as spokesperson for the ANC. You'll know what I'm referring to. There was a proclamation signed this week by the President. The Special Investigating Unit is now looking at a contract involving a company that you were involved with. It was supposed to provide a service to the Ekurhuleni Metro. As I understand it, was to provide sort of three-wheeled motorbikes. I don't know if they're motorbikes or cars, but that would help people who are recycling waste. Is there anything wrong with that contract? Are you worried about this investigation?
Well, I'm not worried about the investigation. As a matter of fact, I'm not even a director of the company. So it just shocked me that I find my name having to be. But of course, I mean, if there are issues that have got to be clarified, the company has got its own structure. They are quite capable to deal with that. They will be able to clarify where there are challenges or gray areas or issues that they need to really clarify. They will be able to clarify that. I can tell you that where they are comfortable that they will be able to deal with all of the issues. And by the way, they've also assured me that even the beneficiaries themselves are now using what has been supplied. So I don't think there's a crisis. The SIU process is quite helpful. We must support institutions like the SIU, because what the SIU does is that it doesn't criminalize processes of government. It gives everyone an opportunity to provide the necessary clarity. So people shouldn't get worried when there's an investigation by the SIU. It criminalizes no one. So if you know that you have got facts, if you know that you have not done anything wrong, the SIU is a credible body that allows anyone to then provide that kind of clarity. So these processes must be embraced by all.
Pule Mabe, I really appreciate you coming in. I really appreciate the time this Friday afternoon. I know it's been a busy week and you've probably got more to come, so I do appreciate the time. Thank you. Pule Mabe is the national spokesperson of the African National Congress.